Yeah, that's definitely gotta be one of my favorite lines from George Carlin's stand-up.
Excuse me, could I get a Thunderbird?
Alright, who's ready to kiss my hammer?
Now, am I gonna get my damn Thunderbird or not?
Yeah, you're gonna get your Thunderbird. Sorry about that.
Hey everyone, Road Breach here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Flame Toys Furai model, Bumblebee.
Hey, did you say Furai model?
Yes, I said Furai model! We're not doing this again!
But other than that, before we take a look at the figure, let's take a look at the box. And this box is pretty big. I keep getting big boxes. Whatever. We get a nice picture of Bumblebee right there, just looking all badass and ready to smack somebody in the face with his giant hammer. Got Transformers on the side, and it is in fact an authentic Transformers product. We got Flame Toys, Furai model. I'm guessing that says Furai model. I don't know. I don't speak Japanese. A Bumblebee model kit with an Autobot symbol. Somewhat of the same thing on the side. Bigger image. It's closer to Bumblebee's face. Nothing really on the other side. Pretty much the same thing on the top. And we get a bunch of obligatory product shots of the figure in action, and a bunch of the runners that's inside this box. Well, that was inside this box before I put it together. And we get another picture, this time of the actual product, right there. And, you know, it says Hasbro, 2019, copyright 2019 Hasbro, all rights reserved. So, I guess we're done with the box. Let's take a look at the figure. So, taking a look at the details, I painted his face with, well, I painted his crest with a bit of black paint, and I also outlined his face with a Sharpie, and, well, some of the mouth I did get with paint, and I also did get these two collar pieces with some black paint. I also went over the tires with a bit of matte Mod Podge, which is why they look matte. And I also went inside the rims with a bit of silver paint and a bit of black. And just going down the figure, I did mostly like dry brush some paint on there. And I spray painted a piece of cardboard and stamped the Autobot symbol with it. And I put some yellow paint in the spots where it was like in that those little crevices right there, so it would look a little better. And I probably should have went in with some black underneath this roof of the car, but I didn't because I didn't feel like it. And going down the arms, you can see some more dry brushing, and in the joints I did get some silver in there on the parts that wouldn't be rubbed off, of course. And I also did do a little bit, like a minuscule amount of dry brushing on his hands. Same thing with his crotch skirts. And going down the legs, some more silver dry brushing, some silver on the joints, and some of that is kind of rubbing away on the sides. But on the back, stayed perfectly intact. And I also did put a little bit of like a yellow and beige mixture of paint in his headlights. Probably go in with some white later. And the same thing that I did with the upper tires. And on his feet, I went in with some more dry brushing on all this detail that's on his feet. Like a little bit of brown to make it look like he's been stepping in mud. And on his back, some more dry brushing. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the headlights. Well, no, the tail lights right there. Because the reason why I painted it is because I was like, you know what? I'm old enough to do it. Toy makers don't use stickers anymore. Well, they barely use stickers. So, you know what? I'm not going to use those stupid stickers. I'm going to tell them to go frick themselves. And that's the long and short of it. As for optional parts, we get 2 splayed open hands with some more silver dry brushing on them. And to swap the hands, this time it's actually taking the front of the hand, popping that off, taking the appropriate hand, and sliding that on. And of course, what would an Autobot soldier be without some armament? So, for his armament, you get a gun. This paint job that I did kind of reminds me of... It looks a little familiar.
Hey. Down here. Am I the one you're speaking of? Does it look like me? Well, there's your answer right there, partner.
Oh, okay. That's why the paint job is so familiar to me. But other than that, just put it in his hand. You just take that, put the gun in there, and then you take that and you
put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. So help me, and cut.
There you go.
And you also get his hammer, which I went to town on this thing. Like, there's a bunch of dry brushing everywhere in, like, silver and black, and I went over the parts that were yellow on the box. This thing, I feel I did a really good job on this. I'm proud of it. And same thing to get the hammer into his hands, except this is a little bit difficult. Because in order to do this, you have to angle his hands just right, or else his fingers are just going to pop off. So this is going to be a little bit of an endeavor, so let's see if we can do this. Hopefully without any profanity, because I don't feel like cursing. Okay, there we go. And while I wasn't thinking of doing it, I did kind of think of having him swing this thing around like Thor, but you know what? That wouldn't get him off the ground. But you know what would get him off the ground? This! His helipack. And I also went to town on this thing in terms of detailing, although I probably could have had a bit of dry brushing on the propellers. I believe the propellers were in this gaudy green color, well, greenish yellow color. So I painted it black because I feel like that's more appropriate. And I also went over these vents with some black and some silver dry brushing. Same thing with these tanks down here, along with the bits of the vents that are still there, well, the intakes. And I also went over the core of the little canopy there. For some stupid reason, it keeps wanting to split, so that kind of ruins the look of it. And I assume this is also a tank down here, so I went over that with silver, and I also just went over it with dry brushing for this thing that's sticking out. I have no idea what this is for, but it's there. And I also decided to go over the afterburners, and I painted these little flaps or whatever. I painted it black underneath those. And to get this on Bumblebee, there's a little hole right there, so you just clip that. So you just peg that in, and he's ready to fly like a bumblebee. Of course, he wouldn't look good doing any of this without some fantastic posability. Rotation at the rotor, rotation at the thrusters, ball joint at the afterburners themselves, hinge joint at this fuselage, I guess, ball joint at the head, so he can rotate 360 degrees. And there's a hinge underneath that can make him so he can look up that far and look down that far. There's a little bit of head pivoting too. Arms can move outward. They can shift forward and back a little bit. They can rotate on a ball joint. These shoulder pads can move out a little bit so he can spread his arms out. Swivel here. Double bend at the elbow. Ball joint at the wrist, which is more like a swivel. Hinge at the canopy section of the car. Ball joint. Ball joint at the chest. Ball joint at the waist, so he can rotate a little bit. He can arc that far and crunch that far, and if you move that a little bit, ball joint at the front skirts, ball joint at the back skirts. He can kick forward that far, kick back that far. Side skirts can move up barely at all. They can also rotate. His legs can move outward that far. Double bend at the knee. Ball joint at the ankle, so it can rotate a little bit, move forward that far, move backward that far. They can pivot, and there's a toe joint, which is a ball joint, funnily enough. Now for size comparisons, Voyager class Springer, Wolfwire, Combiner Wars Victorion, the last model I reviewed, the next model I'm going to review, stay tuned, Power Rangers Lightning Collection Beast Morphers Blue Ranger, and MP10. So he's around a deluxe class, or Voyager.
Overall, this figure's pretty cool. While this isn't really what I'm used to in terms of building model kits, this was still a pretty fun build to put together. I'm really looking forward to Flame Toys' Optimus Prime and Devastator, although I'm not really sure about their Seekers. I don't know if I want those yet. But this was pretty fun to do. Although there was one part of the build that really was a complete bitch to do, in particular the roof of the car. I managed to get through that and the figure was completed. I really do like the carryover with the hammer from Transformers The Last Knight. Say what you want about that movie, but I thought Bumblebee with a sledgehammer was pretty cool. And this also is pretty cool. It really wasn't all that fun to read the instructions, but I managed to get through it and put together the figure. And even though it can't transform, I think that's perfectly fine in my book. I just want a posable action figure that has a good amount of detail. And that's what I was able to do with this figure. So, I guess that's it. Thanks for watching, and gotta zoom.